Epping, Essex. The quiet shattered by protest. Crowds fill the streets, voices raised, banners waving. Police form lines as anger and fear collide outside the Bell Hotel. This is the new front line in Britain's immigration debate. Overnight, a market town became a battleground. Some demand safety and control, others call for compassion and justice. Tension crackles in the air. This is not just Epping's story, but a national crisis erupting in real time. Across the country, towns like Skegness, Knowsley and Newquay are swept up in the same storm. Ordinary people, extraordinary anger. The debate is loud, urgent and impossible to ignore. On one side, fear about safety, about pressure on schools and doctors. On the other, calls for humanity and support for those seeking refuge. The atmosphere is electric, divided and deeply personal. Where do you stand? Do you support the protests? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Would you stand with your community on this issue? Comment and join the conversation. The story of the protests is deeply connected to a battle that took place not on the streets, but in the courtroom. When the Home Office first announced its plan to use the Bell Hotel for asylum seekers, Epping Forest District Council didn't just accept it. The council argued that using a hotel in this way was a material change of use. In simple terms, they said that turning a hotel for tourists and business travelers into a long-term hostel for asylum seekers was not what the building was zoned for. However, the court's decision did not go the way the council and many protesters had hoped. In a landmark ruling, a High Court judge found in favor of the Home Office. This ruling was a major blow to the council and a significant victory for the government. The growing protests have not gone unnoticed by politicians, both locally and nationally. At the local level, Epping Forest District Council has been at the forefront of the response. On the national stage, the protests have been amplified by prominent political figures, most notably Nigel Farage. He frames the issue as a crisis of national sovereignty and border control, arguing that the government has lost control and that local people are paying the price. To understand why people are gathering on the streets of Epping, you have to listen to what they're saying. For many, their primary concern is safety. They talk about a group of single men whose backgrounds are unknown to them being housed in the town centre. Residents point to the struggles that local people are already facing. They talk about long waiting lists to see a doctor, a shortage of affordable housing for their own children, and schools that are already full. There's also a strong feeling of being completely ignored by those in power. Many protesters say this is not about racism, it's about a lack of democracy. They feel that a major decision about the character and fabric of their town was made in an office in London with no consultation, no discussion, and no respect for the people who would be most affected. On the other side of the police line, there is a very different message being shared. Here, the focus is on compassion and solidarity. Groups like Stand Up to Racism and local residents who support asylum seekers, they point to the hotel where these people are being housed. They say these people are among the most vulnerable in the world. Many have fled conflict, some have fled torture, others have fled persecution. From countries like Syria, Afghanistan and Eritrea, they organize collections of clothing and toiletries, offer language support and try to build bridges with new arrivals. They see the people in the hotel not as a threat or a statistic, but as future neighbours, colleagues and friends. The events in Epping are not happening in isolation. They are a local expression of a much larger national issue. Across the United Kingdom, around 30,000 asylum seekers are currently being housed in hotels. This has become the default response to a big increase in arrivals. The recent protests erupted after the arrest of a resident at the hotel, Hadush Kabatu, 41, from Ethiopia. He was charged with sexual assault, harassment, and inciting a girl to engage in sexual activity. This incident has intensified local fears, with many parents deeply worried for their children's safety. They voice concerns about aggressive, unvetted, illegal immigrants being housed in their community and say they feel powerless to protect their families. The asylum system has been struggling to keep up. A huge backlog of cases has developed. People are waiting years for a decision on their claim. While they wait, they are not allowed to work and must be housed and supported by the state. The cost of this policy is staggering. The challenges the UK is facing with immigration are not unique. Across Europe, countries are grappling with similar issues, and in many places, similar tensions are emerging. In Germany, Ireland, and even traditionally welcoming Sweden, the political mood has shifted. we find ourselves in a deeply polarized moment. The scenes in Epping and towns like it show a country struggling to talk about immigration. Both sides believe they are standing up for what is right, but they are talking past each other. A fair solution must include a much faster, more efficient asylum system so people aren't left in limbo for years. It must involve treating people with dignity, moving them out of expensive, isolating hotels into more suitable accommodation where they can begin to build a life. Finding the answers is perhaps the greatest challenge of all. It will require leadership not just from politicians but from within communities to find the common ground that feels out of reach. How can we create spaces where people with different views actually listen? How can we discuss immigration's real challenges without fear and blame? Across the United Kingdom, the unrest in Epping is just one chapter. In the past year alone, more than 120 anti-migrant protests have erupted in over 50 towns and cities, from Glasgow to Dover. News footage shows crowds gathering outside hotels, chanting slogans and holding signs. Police lines form barriers between demonstrators and the buildings housing asylum seekers. In Liverpool, Leeds, and Birmingham, sometimes peacefully, but often with tensions running high. A map highlights clusters of protest activity. The largest demonstrations have occurred where hotels were repurposed as temporary accommodation, fueling local anxieties about community resources and security. Recent polling reveals a nation divided. YouGov found 56% expressed concern about asylum numbers, while just 28% supported the government's approach. Social media analysis shows spikes in anti-migrant sentiment after high-profile incidents. But there's also a surge in calls for compassion and reform from advocacy groups. Infographics display the numbers. In February alone, 18 separate protests, and nearly 40% of local councils have reported at least one anti-migrant demonstration in the past 6 months. What emerges is a picture of a country grappling with its identity and values. The scale and spread reflect not just local frustrations, but national anxiety about change, community, and the future. As the demonstrations continue, can public opinion shift, and can dialogue replace division? The spark that ignited the nationwide protests can be traced to a single harrowing event. In Epping, news broke of a sexual assault allegedly involving an asylum seeker housed at a local hotel. The story spread rapidly, first through local media, then picked up by national outlets. Shock in Epping, assault allegation at Asylum hotel. Community demands answers. Worried residents gather outside the hotel, faces blurred for privacy. Placard, protect our community. Placard, enough is enough. Interviews reveal local anger and fear. We're not against helping people, but what about our children's safety? We weren't consulted, they just put them here, and now look what's happened. Inside a crowded community meeting, voices rise in heated debate. Residents demand accountability from local officials who struggle to calm the room. This incident crystallized anxieties about the rapid arrival of asylum seekers. Fear, crime fear, resource strain fear, cultural change, once simmering beneath the surface, now burst into the open. Social media posts amplify outrage. Hashtags trend nationwide. Advocacy groups caution against collective blame. But for some, the damage is done. The assault case becomes a rallying cry, cited again and again by protesters across the country. For Epping and communities like it, one incident became a symbol, an emotional flashpoint that turned concern into anger and anger into action. As the fallout from Epping rippled across the nation, anti-migrant protesters found themselves at the heart of a growing movement. Their message: the government has failed to protect local communities. Secure our borders, put locals first, safety over sympathy. Their faces blurred for privacy. We hear from Mark Jennings, a local protest leader. We're not here to spread hate. We're here because our leaders ignored us. Crime rates in towns with migrant hotels have risen by 18% in the last year. Our schools and hospitals are overwhelmed. Why should our children's safety come second? Reported crime rates in host communities 2022-2024. Hospital wait times before and after migrant arrivals. A woman, Sarah Evans, addresses a crowd through a megaphone. We want compassion, but not at the expense of our families. Our GP surgery is booked solid for weeks. Teachers are stretched thin. Our council tax goes up, but services go down. Calls to emergency services up by 12%, school enrollment, exceeding capacity in several districts. Protesters gather outside a town hall demanding answers. Where's the consultation? Where's the plan? For many in these communities, the Epping incident wasn't just an isolated event. It became evidence of a broken system, one that places the burden on ordinary citizens while government officials remain unaccountable. Yet, behind the numbers and rhetoric, real anxieties persist about safety, about resources, and about being heard. The debate now is no longer just about one incident. It's about the future of the nation's borders and who gets to decide what safety means. As the national debate over migration intensifies, one issue remains at the center of public concern: crime statistics, especially those involving rape and sexual assault. Headlines and social media posts often highlight cases involving non-UK nationals, fueling anxiety and protest. According to the UK Home Office, in 2023, non-UK nationals accounted for about 13% of those charged with rape, while making up just under 10% of the population. For sexual assault, the share was slightly lower, around 11%. Recent years have seen a steady increase in reported sexual offences overall. Experts caution, however, that the majority of these crimes are still committed by UK nationals. Migration, they say, is not the primary driver of these offences. Yet, high-profile incidents involving migrants have sparked outrage and fear, especially among anti-migrant protesters. Police data from 2022 to 2024 shows no consistent pattern of increased sexual offences in communities hosting migrant centres. However, some areas have reported spikes after specific incidents, adding to local tensions. In Parliament and on television, politicians and commentators debate the meaning of these numbers while protest signs and placards fill the streets. For many protesters, these statistics are seen as evidence that migration poses a threat to public safety, intensifying calls for tougher border controls and stricter policies. But others argue that fear can distort the facts and that honest debate requires careful analysis and compassion for all victims. In the end, the statistics tell a complicated story, one that continues to fuel protest, shape public opinion, and challenge the nation to find a way forward. Like and subscribe to Smarter Brains for more engaging deep dives into breaking news, politics, sociology, economics, and social policy.